Which hitters should you go out of your way not to draft in 2023 fantasy baseball? I'm about to tell you. First off, let's start with a big name who's getting a big contract, but not nearly as big as it could have been. Looks like a couple of teams maybe dodged a bullet there, but you should too, because you're going to draft this guy probably way too high in fantasy. First of all, we always talk about the injury concerns. When it's constant and every year you're missing multiple games, that is a huge red flag you just can't ignore no matter how talented the player is. I'm talking 234 games missed over the last 6 seasons combined. Health concerns are one thing, but I also am worried that the production doesn't match the ADP. Some people are overvaluing this guy because been on a winning team, he's put together solid seasons, but are you getting elite fantasy production? I don't think so. This is a case of maybe better in reality than fantasy. No speed here, talking 0 steals over the last 3 years. The power, it's solid, 26 home runs, that is a career high. So nothing that you can't get from somebody later on in the draft. The batting average, good. Is it league winning? Is it stuff that's going to carry you in fantasy? Not really. And last time I checked, most leagues don't count defense, so forget that. Carlos Correa, look, great player, great talent. That besides those numbers not really being tremendous for fantasy purposes, that ankle was enough to scare away the Giants from giving him a 13-year contract, which is insane in and of itself. And then the Mets were going to come through with 12, and they both balked. Thankfully for them, because those are going to be terrible deals. Well, now the Twins get him back, and they're happy to have him on a 6-year deal. But we've had doctors come out and say, after taking a look, he might have the worst ankle ever. That's enough to make me think, I'm not even going to take a chance no matter how far he falls, and neither should you. And now a guy who's been legitimately a fantasy MVP and real life MVP, but that was in the past. A big mistake people make is to keep paying for name value because a guy has been elite. Guys, we have to look forward. He is not elite anymore, and the numbers back it up. I'm not talking about a down season. I'm talking about multiple down seasons, and we keep expecting a bounce back. Why? Now 31 years old. It's no coincidence that his best season, his MVP season, was in his peak at 27 years old. It's been 3 years since we've had that kind of production, and now it's just going downhill in a hurry. So last year, you got 19 steals. That was good. But 14 home runs, 57 RBIs, and this was over a full season. First we blamed the short season, then we blamed the back issues, it was injuries. Well, you can't blame injuries after he played nearly a full season last year. The average isn't carrying him either. 252 last year was the best he's hit over the last 3 seasons. I know everyone feels like Christian Yelich should be an elite player still, but the numbers just say he isn't. The only category he's really giving you a big boost in is runs scored, but you're going to pay a top 100 ADP for that? I'm not. Let's go with another outfielder past his prime, has dealt with injuries, and missed the entire season 2022. It was a shoulder injury. This is somebody who always been overvalued in my book because of where he played, and it just so happens that now a change of scenery is going to make things a lot worse for him in terms of offensive context. And I don't mean the team necessarily, although they weren't great last year, but the park factor cannot be ignored when you're talking about a guy who is a left-handed hitter going to the park. That is the worst for power among left-handed hitters. Not that we can even be sure that power's still there in the first place, because after multiple 25 plus home run seasons in a row, in 2021, last time he actually played, we saw only 14 home runs. Yeah, sure, traded some power for average, but back when he was a power hitter, he wasn't hitting for average. It's like you're getting one or the other, and I'm pretty sure we're not getting the power. Are we going to get the average with a bum shoulder now on a lesser team in a worse environment? Look, Michael Conforto is a player that still has some of that name recognition. Some people are going to try to get him on the cheap and get a bounce back season from him. The thing is, you're getting all risk and potentially very little reward, if any. We don't have to just look at older players to find busts and draft day avoids. Sometimes these young players who are hyped up prospects, guys who have all these tools, can still wind up being overvalued, overrated. I get it. Cheap draft day cost, worth a lotto ticket, but there are some players that I'm just ready to give up on, and there's one because I think that he's already effectively going to be replaced by mid-season, if not sooner, when you have a farm system with some young players that are just as talented, if not more so, especially on a team that is a contender and is not going to give a long leash to these failed prospects. I'm looking at a guy who had the pedigree as a top prospect, but has not put it together, had some big swing and miss issues early on, and then traded off and actually increased the contact rate, which is great, but then traded off for hard contact because the contact he was making wasn't really getting the job done. Only 6 home runs in 421 at-bats. That's not going to move the needle for you. The batting average is just mediocre. The defense is not going to be good enough to make him stick in the field. That it won't be long before Gavin Lux is effectively replaced because a guy I mentioned in my top 10 prospects video, Michael Busch, is waiting and ready to take over and provide the offensive spark that Lux hasn't. And we've already seen Miguel Vargas is probably going to be holding down a starting job. Lux might just wind up being a burned pick. I hate to rain on anyone's parade. It's such a nice story when you have a guy who's a career minor leaguer who comes up and has his first taste of the bigs and is immediately successful, very successful in fact, hit .324 with 13 home runs and 34 RBIs in basically a third of a season. You prorate those numbers, that's not how it works. Because in reality, we're talking a small sample size, 222 at-bats, that's more than a cup of coffee, but still, your major league career consists of those 222 at-bats, and this is a guy that nothing was expected from, delivered the dog days of summer for a team that was not a contender. Are you buying into it? Especially when you're talking about a guy that is 30 years old. Well, if you want to take a shot on Joey Meneses of the Washington Nationals, be my guest. I've been here before, been burned. Anybody who remembers not too long ago, Frank Schwindel, the Cubs bought up a bunch of guys after they traded several of their starters and they had some success, and then you drafted them and then they wound up being nothing. Meneses, the next Schwindel, there's a good chance. Not worth the investment at any point in your draft other than the very final rounds, and somebody will buy into that small sample and take him sooner. Don't let it be you. And if you're looking for some pitchers that should be avoided on draft day, you can click right here and find out who I'm staying away from.